So guys, hey guys, welcome back to our channel. So in this video we are gonna see, what if Fem Kyuubi becomes possessive of Naruto during the academy? This is movie 1, and if you want more then please leave a like, share and subscribe. Let's get in the video. Naruto Uzumaki hated the looks of scorn he received every day. He could practically feel the hate as they glared at him as he went about his day. Those that didn't glare at him ignored him completely, as if his existence was something they wished they could ignore. At the age of 11 he had one more year in the academy. He had hoped that he would make friends in the academy, but it wasn't meant to be. At least he wasn't ignored. Some of the other kids weren't too bad, but none of them were what he would consider a friend. The girl of his dreams was in class, but she hit him more often than she actually spoke to him. Iruka-sensei wasn't bad. He was awfully strict, but he did sometimes buy ramen for him. Ramen Ichiraku was the best place in the world and he loved to eat there every chance he got. The old man Chuki actually treated him nice, and Ayame-chan always smiled at him. Sadly he didn't get to eat there too often. He didn't have a lot of money and he felt guilty eating for free. But he did go as often as he could, and Gigi treated him sometimes too. Right now as he walked back from his day at the academy he could feel those angry glares. Sometimes he worried that they would take it further than glaring and making snide remarks. It had happened once. A drunken man had tried to attack him one evening, but in a flash the man was gone and Naruto was unharmed. Naruto figured having Anbu watching him to curtail his pranks had an unexpected bonus of dealing with any violent individuals. What Naruto didn't know was that the Anbu protectors had saved his life on numerous occasions. If possible, Naruto would have been tortured and killed many times over, but the Anbu served the Hokage, and regardless of their personal feelings they would fulfill their mission. This frustrated many of the citizens of Konoha who longed to lash out at the demon container. Some had tried poison, others explosives or hurled weaponry, but the Anbu guardians were a shield like no other. Most of the time the young Jinchuriki never even realized his life was in danger. It had gotten to the point that most of the shinobi and civilians who hated the demon brat had given up on doing bodily injury. That didn't deter them from making Naruto's life miserable. Shops sold him overpriced goods or spoiled food. Some refused to even take his business. The places that had originally tolerated his business were soon pressured to follow suit, all except the small ramen stand of Ramen Ichiraku. This did not sit well with those that hated Naruto, and business had suffered. It wasn't until well into his last year at the academy that someone decided to arrange a more permanent solution to the demon-loving father and daughter shop owners. Naruto was happily eating a bowl of miso ramen, chatting away happily with the Chuki and Ayame. I almost had Sasuke Tem in our spar. Well, maybe not almost, but next time I am going to get him, believe it. Ayame laughed. Why do you dislike him so much? He's a bastard. All the girls are like Sasuke-kun this and Sasuke-kun that. I don't see what's so special about him anyway. Chuki served another fresh bowl of ramen for Naruto. Naruto hesitated a moment, but the kindly man said, "It's all right Naruto, we enjoy hearing your stories about the Ninja Academy." Naruto gratefully helped himself to another bowl. He hadn't had breakfast or lunch since his pantry was empty. Naruto continued to chatter on until another man entered the ramen stand. The man wore a Chunin vest and had a burn scar across the lower part of his face. He glared at Naruto, who ignored him and continued eating the food of the gods. Chuki frowned. "What can I get you, Shinobi-san? Why do you let this wretch eat here?" Chuki narrowed his eyes. "Naruto is welcome any time. If you don't like it you can leave." Naruto felt a warm glow radiate from his gut that had nothing to do with the food he was consuming. "You're a disgrace to Konoha. How can you serve this demon spawn? If you keep doing this you'll go out of business, or worse." Chuki was angry now. The poor boy did nothing wrong. He hadn't asked to be given this curse, and it was cruel how the village treated him. "Get out now. You aren't welcome in my shop ever again." The Chunin smirked. "You're making a mistake, Chuki. A big mistake. I'll be seeing you." The man left the ramen stand. Naruto was nervous. "Hey old man, he isn't going to make trouble for you, is he?" Chuki shook his head. "No Naruto, some people just like to act big. There isn't anything to worry about, just eat your supper." Naruto did just that, and soon he was lost in the comfort of a full belly surrounded by the few people he cared about. The young Uzumaki had never known what it was like to have a family, but he figured this is how it would have felt like. 3 days later Chuki and Ayame were closing shop. They made their way home without incident, but as soon as they stepped foot inside they were assaulted. There were 3 assailants and they struck with brutal efficiency for they were shinobi. After they tied and gagged them, the scarred Chunin from the other day smiled wickedly at the pair. I told you, old man, you had plenty of warnings. Chuki yelled in his gag. The Chunin took out a blade and pressed it against Ayame's throat. So was it worth it, ramen man? Was it worth feeding the demon? Chuki was terrified. He loved his daughter more than anything. He vainly struggled in his bonds, desperation giving him strength, however it was futile. Their captor pushed the blade down slightly, drawing blood. Ayame had tears in her eyes. She had never been so frightened in her life. One of the other captors said, "It sure would be a waste to just off her now. Can't we have some fun with her first?" The Chunin shrugged. "Fine, but I am not touching the demon-loving whore. She might be infected with the fox taint." The lecherous grin on his companion made it clear he had no concerns. Chuki screamed himself hoarse and struggled like a madman trying to free himself. The Chunin laughed at kicked the helpless ramen chef. The Chunin's kicks were designed to be painful but not outright kill the man. Soon he was a crippled and broken man, forced to watch his only daughter be raped. When they were done, the Chunin said, "All right, let's kill them, get out of here." They simply slit their captives' throats and watched as they died. At that point in time both Ayame and Chuki welcomed death in order to escape the depravity of their captors. Sarutobi Hiruzen was furious. Word had reached him about Chuki and his daughter. That they were targeted by those who hated Naruto was obvious. The killing intent from the Hokage Tower reminded the village that he more than earned the title Shinobi no Kami. "I want them found and made an example of." They tortured and murdered 2 innocent citizens of the Leaf. The Sandaime barked out orders and a full investigation was launched. Hiruzen vowed that he would have every single shinobi interrogated under Inoichi's supervision until he found the culprit. "Oh Naruto, how can I explain what has happened?" His orders given, Hiruzen sat at his desk. His head was bowed under the weight of responsibility. How could it have come to this? The Yondaime had wished for Naruto to be viewed as a hero, and now the village had gone so far in the opposite direction that they had murdered a family just for associating with him. An Anbu entered into the office. "Hokage-sama, Naruto has been taken to the hospital." Fear clutched the old Hokage's chest. What happened? Naruto saw the ramen shop had been closed down. He asked a villager what happened and they told him. Sarutobi sighed. "What is his condition?" "Catatonic. He is completely unresponsive. The poor boy must be in shock. He needs to be around people he knows. Tell Iruka to cancel class today and go to the hospital. I will go there now." "Hi Hokage-sama. Naruto had learned of Chuki and Ayame's fate. He had learned that it was because of him that they had died a horrible death. He had withdrawn into himself completely. He refused to face a world that could do this. Inside Naruto's mindscape, the Kyuubi sensed something was different. He was still behind the accursed seal, but it felt weaker somehow. Kurama pressed one of his claws against the bars and to his shock it passed right through. The seal was still there, but he could move out of the cage. Kurama was delighted. He could finally be free. He could wreak vengeance on all. But he did not yet at least. Kurama was many things, but stupid was not one of them. He possessed wisdom gathered from long years of life. He had been aware of the world through the eyes of the Jinchuriki that had imprisoned him. One shinobi had enslaved him with the hated Sharingan. Another shinobi had sealed him again. That shinobi's teacher was still alive and could probably seal him again. The current Hokage was also one who could use that accursed seal. No, if he burst free now from his host, he would thoroughly enjoy punishing the village for imprisoning him, but he would soon be confined once more. But there is another way. Kurama tried to speak with Naruto in his mindscape, but there was no sign of the boy. No response. It was like the boy was brain dead. With no one to interfere within the body of Naruto, he took over. He looked out into the world with Naruto's eyes. He took control of Naruto's body and raised his hand. "I can't use any of my own chakra, or they'll suspect something. For the time being, I'll have to learn how to use Naruto's chakra." A nurse said something and he listened. "The patient has regained consciousness. Bring the doctor in." The doctor came in and asked some questions. Kurama knew he had to pretend to be Naruto, but he refused to be the ball of sunshine that Naruto showed the world. The death of 2 of his precious people would be the perfect cover to become more serious and less idiotic. His response to the doctor's questions was minimal and listless. After a few minutes the Hokage came in. Kurama had to force a vicious smirk from manifesting on his features. How he enjoyed the pained expression on the old man's face. Naruto, I am glad to see you awake. Gigi, is it true? Did they hurt them because of me? Kurama was careful to use Naruto's speech mannerisms. Hiruzen's face was absolute priceless, such sorrow and remorse. We are still investigating the incident, but I know we will find those responsible. Clever old man, let's up the ante a bit, shall we? Gigi, I am scared. What if they go after Iruka-sensei or you next? It's all my fault. It would have been better if I was never born. The stricken look on Sandame's face caused Kurama to cackle internally. None of that, Naruto. What happened was a tragedy, but it was not your fault. As for Iruka, he is a shinobi and I am the Hokage. No one will harm us. And now I need to start forging a new identify. Kurama forced tears into the eyes of his host. Even if I was there, all I would have done was get in the way. I am useless. Hiruzen sighed. Naruto, you are still young. You aren't useless. I am sure you will be a great shinobi. No, you're wrong. I am the dead last of the class. I barely understand the things Iruka-sensei talks about. I am just a burden to you and everyone else. Kurama was enjoying himself, but he had to be careful not to lay it on too thick. I hope this village hasn't scarred him for life. Kami, please let Naruto recover from this tragedy. The Hokage tried again. Naruto, I know you feel useless after a tragedy, but you will get past this. You will be a great shinobi and everyone will come to see that in time. I believe it, Naruto, and deep down I know you do too. Kurama internally rolled his eyes. The Hokage's heartfelt garbage was starting to nauseate him. He debated with himself on where to take the conversation from here. If he was to use Naruto's body as his own to learn how to get around so many shinobi who had the use of Fuinjutsu that could seal him again, he would need to actually have this body become a shinobi. Based on his current skill set, it was a dismal possibility. Something had to change and he needed a catalyst for it. Gigi, I want to believe, but after today I don't know if I can. Is there some way I could get extra lessons? Just to catch up with the other kids. The Hokage in his guilt-ridden state was anxious to grant such a request. He smiled at the boy and said, "Of course, Naruto, I'll make sure you get extra training. I promise I'll do whatever I can to make sure you become a fine shinobi." Kurama thought it was better just to cry and hug the old man than to actually thank the decrepit bastard. Surely those words would have stuck in his throat. Shortly thereafter, Iruka arrived on the scene. Naruto, I heard you had collapsed. I am glad you're awake now. Kurama looked at Iruka and saw the resemblance to one of the many villagers he killed while under the genjutsu. It was interesting that the instructor could see past the hatred for the Kyuubi when so many other people couldn't. Kurama chuckled internally at the irony that the other villagers were now right and Iruka was the foolish one. Naruto's normally shining cerulean eyes seemed so dull now. Iruka forced tears from his eyes. Naruto had it bad enough, but now to be forced to endure this tragedy. It was too depressing for words. He looked up and allowed his host's eyes to harden a bit with apparent determination. Iruka-sensei, Gigi said I am going to get extra training so I can catch up. I am not going to let what happened to the old man and Ayame-chan happen to anyone again. I am going to be a shinobi and protect the whole village. He looked down and said, I'll even start paying attention in class. Oddly enough, the nine-tailed fox had paid attention during academy instruction. Being in a cage, he had only his own thoughts for company. A window to the outside world was a blessing. The seal on the previous Jinchuriki had muted out all sight and sound, could only pass through muffled. He would have to fake ignorance about a lot of things, but to a being of his intellect it should be child's play. Iruka forced a smile to his face and drove away the lump in his throat so he could speak. Good Naruto, that's a promise that I think they would have respected. Iruka and the Hokage stayed with Naruto a while and Kurama became irritated with their presence. It was beyond aggravating to have to pretend to be a weak, grieving little boy when he was the most powerful Biju. But for his freedom he would endure it. He would endure anything to avoid being trapped and caged like he had been for almost 3 lifetimes. He would master this shinobi art they call Fuinjutsu and ensure he was never trapped again. Kurama was becoming more used to operating Naruto's body. Being a chakra construct, he had no problems controlling his own abilities, but the boy had atrocious chakra control. In a real fight he would be dead until he used his own chakra, and if that occurred he would be sealed again. He had to get stronger, not as the Kyuubi but as Naruto. He had been forced to spend time in the hospital under observation before he was allowed to return home. The boy's apartment was confining and he disliked it immensely, but again he would endure. Kurama had been anxious to get started on making his host's body stronger but was keenly aware of the Anbu shadows that followed him everywhere. His home provided some privacy. He knew that a certain clan could see through walls. There was a girl in his class from that clan and he did not feel a similar chakra signature among the Anbu outside of his apartment. Through his attention in the academy classes, Kurama knew about chakra control exercises as well as what was essential to taking care of a shinobi body. He began by attempting the leaf exercise. He substituted paper in place of a leaf. It was slow going. Trying to use someone else's chakra made it difficult in the extreme. It would take time and patience to master Naruto's chakra network. All of the time trapped within his hosts had given the demon fox patience. He thought nothing of sitting there for hours trying to manipulate the piece of paper on his forehead with pure chakra. The second thing he knew that was critical was the physical body itself. He needed appropriate exercise and nutrition. The exercise part was easy, and in a desire for efficiency he began to use the leaf exercise while doing a variety of calisthenics. He also did push-ups, sit-ups and lifted his academy textbooks in repetition. Nutrition would also be important. All of his hosts had been blessed with rapid healing due to his unjust confinement within them. Naruto would not die without proper food, but his growth would be stunted and his body would be slower and weaker than it otherwise should have been. The solution to this was obvious. Simply tell the Hokage that he didn't have food and that the store owners wouldn't let him purchase their food, and Kurama did just that. He walked to the Hokage tower and waited until he could see his Gigi and told him how hungry he was. He tearfully told the Hokage that it was only because of the ramen stand that he got regular meals and that he was terribly hungry. Kurama couldn't help but laugh every time the Hokage had another look of utter sorrow plastered on his face. This is never going to get old. Naturally Hiruzen, who was still filled with guilt, acted immediately. He took Naruto personally to get groceries and scared the owners out of their wits with a blast of killing intent, promising retribution if he ever heard that they were overcharging or selling bad food to Naruto again. Kurama had to suppress laughter when he sniffed out the scent of urine. The terrified shop owner had wet himself under the Sandame's wrath. Kurama was careful to avoid acting out of character. Naruto didn't eat much beside ramen and cereal. He made certain to avoid picking any vegetables or fruit, which made the Hokage comment on it. "I never eat that stuff. It's gross." And thus another lecture about how if he wanted to be a shinobi he would need to fuel his body with appropriate foods. Kurama played the old man like a fiddle and solemnly agreed to do better and to eat well-balanced meals in the memory of poor Tsuki and Ayame. After their shopping trip, the Hokage announced he would be back in the academy the next day and his tutor would be waiting for him immediately after. When they parted company, Kurama kept Naruto's expression locked. The Anbu were always watching and he refused to give them any reason to be suspicious. It was a good start. His diet had been improved. He had begun chakra control exercise and he was working on molding his host's body to that of a real shinobi. The only real problem he could foresee was that keeping his mask up while dealing with pre-teens would tax even his patience. Hopefully the little brats won't be too irritating. Having my plans ruined because I ripped the arrogant Uchiha brat's face off would be pathetic. Kurama arrived at the academy on time. He decided to stay quiet and withdrawn. If he was questioned about it by Iruka or the Hokage, he would respond that he preferred not to have friends until he was powerful enough to protect them. Naturally Naruto didn't have any friends anyway, but he couldn't see a possible conversation where they would bring up that point to him. He chose a seat in the back of the class and waited for it to begin. The boisterous youth all around him set his teeth on edge, but he allowed none of his inner frustration to show on his host's physiology. Particularly irritating was the rather loud argument that was going on between Sakura and Ino about who got to sit next to their precious Sasuke. Kurama hated Sasuke like he hated every wielder of the Sharingan. Madara Uchiha had robbed him of free will and turned him into a slave to be used in battle. To this day it remained the worst of the injustices. The greatest of the Biju felt that he had suffered. Even the years of imprisonment were better than having his intellect and will stripped from him. The class began and Iruka lectured on the nature of chakra. Kurama was only half paying attention as the discussion was designed for children. As Iruka continued to lecture, Kurama enjoyed a nice daydream of ripping the raven-haired Uchiha's head off. When Iruka called on him it was a surprise. Kurama replied back what had just been said and answered the question accurately but not fully. "Yes, that's correct, Naruto. Can you tell me why that matters?" "Because it's going to be on a stupid test." It would be something Naruto would have said. It was important to not make too many deviations from the personality those around Naruto were familiar with. The deaths of the few positive acquaintances that he had could be milked for a bit, but a too sudden change without any of Naruto's personality shining through could rouse suspicion. The class laughed as Iruka scowled and explained the full and correct answer. Kurama inwardly snorted. The sensei would normally have yelled at Naruto, but apparently he didn't want to upset the traumatized boy. The Biju idly wondered if he should needle him until he did lecture Naruto, only for Kurama to go into a near cationic state in response. It would be amusing to see guilt mar Iruka's scarred face. While amusing, it could complicate training. The rest of the lesson was completed and it was time for physical training outside. Being children, they were mostly excited about this. Few liked sitting all day in a classroom. Outside they were made to do simple exercises, and then it was time to practice kunai throwing. The Shinobi Academy marked every student's scores at practice. It would surprise many children to know the volumes of data the academy instructors had on them. Already they were considering where to best place students and on what teams. Kurama wasn't aware of the extent of the data collection, but he knew Iruka was recording results. Several students struggled with hitting the targets accurately. Most of these students were born from civilian families. Kurama saw civilian after civilian score lower than pretty much every Shinobi clan scion. Shikamaru Nara was the only one who failed that particular exam, and it was obvious to all he had failed to even try. When it was Kurama's turn, he threw the first kunai relying on Naruto's muscle memory. Off the mark, Kurama instantly knew what the problem was but did not bother correcting it on the second throw. Naruto's body was too excited and he had always pushed too much force into the throw instead of making sure it was accurate. On the third and final throw, Kurama made the adjustment in power and the kunai struck the target a few inches off dead center. He'll need to get better than that. Kurama was unhappy that even when he had tried to hit dead center it wasn't perfectly accurate. The nine-tailed fox was actually quite competitive. He had always liked taunting his fellow Biju with the fact that he had more tails and thus more power. To know that he had tried to be perfect but come up short was galling, but that would be remedied soon enough. In Iruka's eyes it was a vast improvement. Naruto typically grew more and more frustrated as he missed and only rarely turned his scores around after an initial failure. "Good aim, Naruto," he congratulated. Kurama growled with disgust from inside Naruto's body as he made it ape the expected response. "I will be the strongest shinobi ever, Iruka-sensei, believe it. How else can I protect you and Gigi?" The Uchiha was up next and proceeded to hit the bullseye 3 times in rapid succession. Kurama saw Sasuke's eyes drift toward Naruto and the boy's lips curled slightly in a smirk. The urge to kill the pompous Uchiha was quickly beaten down, but it remained lingering under the surface. Kurama thought about arranging an accident for Konoha's precious last Uchiha. Surely many rival villages wanted the boy dead. No, that would be unwise. Kurama had a contingent of Anbu guards on him at all times, and likely Sasuke was also watched by the Hokage's elite black ops. "But one day I will rid the world of that foul bloodline. I will not be chained again." His Hyuga classmate was playing with her fingers when Kurama walked past her toward the next station. She squeaked out, "Good throw, Naruto." Her voice was barely audible. He suspected that if it wasn't for the extra-human senses that being a Jinchuriki had graced his host's body with, he would not have heard the remark. Kurama chose to ignore the comment. He thought about the shy Hyuga girl. She was a clan heir that had some strange desire for Naruto. Looking back at his memories, at one point Naruto had helped her against some child bullies. A fragile connection, but one that seemed to have made an impact on her. If Kurama desired to, he could probably have Hinata do almost anything for him. Pity that she is so sickeningly weak. The academy students were then put through an academy-based kata that they had previously memorized. Kurama knew that Naruto had memorized it wrong and had not been corrected by Iruka's assistant instructor Mizuki. Kurama could care less about receiving praise for doing such a basic fighting style kata correctly, so he did not correct the incorrect blocks and movements he made through Naruto's body. Like with the kunai accuracy practice, it was clear that the civilian students were behind their clan counterparts. Their forms were sloppy and they lacked the crisp movements. Kurama was interested to see that Mizuki and Iruka didn't seem to put much effort in correcting more than 1 or 2 of them. It seems they have already written off half of the class as too incompetent for training. They will probably wash out of training even before the formal exams. Then it was lunch time. Kurama ate the well-balanced meal efficiently. Before Kurama had taken over, Naruto would often bother the pink-haired weakling. However, Kurama would not follow that pattern. It would be within the character he was trying to portray. He would still act like Naruto did in some ways, however on a grander scale he would be more withdrawn and cease attempting to befriend Sakura. After lunch it was back to the classroom for more theory. Learning about velocity and explosion radiuses was tiresome for most of the class, but Kurama believed that fuinjutsu might be related to upper mathematics. He hid his interest by making Naruto's body fidgety. He looked around and several times shook himself and then looked at Iruka and the board. Kurama didn't write any notes. He was a Biju, and while his memory wasn't 100% perfect, it was close enough. He would not forget what was said in the classroom, and his more advanced mind was able to grasp the concepts easily enough. The class was distracted when Kiba threw a paper ball at Ino's head. Ino snarled and turned around and shouted, "Naruto, stop throwing things at me." Kurama eyed the blonde-haired girl and protested, "I didn't throw anything at you." Iruka turned around. He had not seen who had thrown it. He looked at Naruto, who was glaring at Ino, and then he observed other students laughing in the back. Iruka was young but had already had experience teaching in the academy, and based on the expression on Kiba's face it was obvious that he was the guilty party. "Kiba, come up here and explain how to calculate the maximum distance of a thrown kunai using these variables." Kiba let out a moan. "I don't know how to do that crap." "Then pay attention," Iruka shouted. Suitably chastised, Kiba lowered his eyes and behaved the rest of the class. Kurama chuckled internally. The mutt's embarrassment was far more enjoyable now that he was free and in control of Naruto's body. It surprised the nine-tailed fox how much more interesting everything was now that he could interact with the outside world. You want me to do what? The question was startlingly rude coming from a Tokubetsu Jonin as she addressed her supreme military leader. The Sandaime puffed on his pipe and took no offense to the disrespectful query. Unlike other villages, he tolerated his subordinates arguing with him. He was secure enough in his position and wisdom not to take such things as an affront. "Enko, I am not asking for a great deal from you, simply provide a few hours of supplemental training to Naruto." Enko still had a hard time wrapping her mind around this. "You want me to work with a child? I don't have time to play babysitter." The old man smiled. "Is that so? I could have sworn I heard you earlier say that there wasn't enough work to keep you entertained and that you would be eager to take on an extra mission." "That was before I learned what it was." Enko grimaced and stared at the Shinobi no Kami. A point had been scored, but the game wasn't over. "Fine, I do have the time, but I am completely unsuited for the task. I am skilled at infiltration, assassination, interrogation and torture. I have never taught anyone anything." Hiruzen shifted his body and his voice changed into what many jonin called lecture mode. He was known as the professor due to his vast knowledge of jutsu and for the habit of explaining the whys behind his decisions. "Enko, you are the perfect instructor. 1. You don't have any animosity toward Naruto. In fact, if I am reading you correctly, you actually empathize with the boy as his circumstances are similar to your own. 2. You are a highly competent shinobi well versed in taijutsu. 3. Due to your curse mark you have learned to become highly aware of your own chakra and your control is similar to that of a genjutsu specialist or a medical nin. 4. I trust you. 5. Enko put her hands up. "All right, enough, I'll do it." On the surface Enko looked put out, but inside she was quite pleased. Not about training Naruto. That was going to be pain. No, she was happy that her Hokage trusted her. Distrustful looks and angry comments was the norm for her life. Only a few got along with her. Ibiki was a hard ass, but he also trusted her. Guy was always friendly, but he annoyed her. Kurenai was her only true friend and confidant. To have the Hokage voice the trust he had in her did much for her morale. He gave her his best grandfatherly smile. "Thank you, Enko. Remember, he is still in the academy and his psyche may be fragile. Go easy on him, at least for now." Enko nodded. She had her sadistic tendencies, but Sarutobi had read her correctly. She did have a small soft spot in her heart for Naruto. If their training partnership lasted long enough, she would show a bit of her sadistic side, but for now he was still a kid who had been royally screwed by the village he served, just like her. After more classroom instruction, the final part of the day was ahead of them, sparring. Many in the class enjoyed it. The shinobi arts drew competitive spirits. The two loudest tended to be Kiba Inuzuka and Naruto Uzumaki. Others kept silent but were just as eager, Sasuke being chief among them. It was obvious to Kurama the boy yearned to prove himself. Not everyone was as eager. Kurama observed Hinata looking even more nervous than normal. Choji never enjoyed sparring, always afraid of hurting someone. Shikamaru was just lazy and didn't care. This time Naruto was not his normal boisterous self. Instead Kurama showed the world a studious and determined Naruto who had a fire in his eyes. This didn't go unnoticed. Ino smirked at the boy. Finally realize you aren't good enough. Kurama considered a few different ways he could kill the girl. Squeezing her neck as she slowly suffocated could be fun. Burning with fire had always been a favorite. Though really, if she upset him enough to throw away his plan and kill indiscriminately, she would be dead in a moment as he ripped her head off. Luckily for the young Yamanaka, he did not lose his temper. Instead he responded steadily, I am not good enough, not yet, but I will be. Ino snorted, yeah right. Further conversation was cut off as the first bout began. Each student would fight one-on-one with a randomly chosen student. Kurama doubted it was truly random, but there wasn't an obvious rhyme or reason. He watched impassively as Sasuke demolished Hinata. Each fight would last for 2 minutes or 3 successful blows were struck. Sasuke's match had only taken 10 seconds. Naruto's pink-haired obsession managed to eke out a win against a civilian boy, and then it was Naruto's turn. He was to face Shino. Shino tilted his head politely and the match was on. Kurama predicted the boy's first blow and brought up his arms when a sloppy block. A more precise block would have allowed a devastating counterattack, but instead Shino followed it up with a combination of kicks to the midsection. Kurama saw the attack coming and stepped into Shino's space and delivered a punch that looked more at home in a civilian tavern than in a shinobi school. The boy was in an awkward position as his kick was now useless and a punch was screaming toward his face. Shino was not fazed and brought his hand up sharply, deflecting the punch. He brought his leg down behind Naruto's and pushed forward. It wasn't the most elegant attack, but it was effective as Naruto fell backwards from the push and the leg behind him. Kurama had expected that, but what he hadn't expected was to feel pain. I have never felt my host's pain as my own. What is going on? He lay on the ground and thought it through. Never before had a host's personality and mind completely dissipated. By controlling the host without his own chakra driving it, he could actually feel what the host felt, not as an intellectual concept but as a physical one. As his mind rapidly considered the pros and cons of this, the crowd of kids was getting restless. Kiba shouted, "Get up, loser." Kurama got to his feet. 1 point had been awarded to Shino. Kurama decided to give them a bit of classic Naruto. He sprinted forward at Shino and launched himself in the air in a flying kick. The kick could have worked if his opponent was bad. Or maybe if he hadn't launched himself so early. As it was, Shino had no difficulties in sidestepping the attack and punching Naruto solidly in the ribs as he flew past. Kurama managed a graceful enough landing, but another point had been scored. Kurama continued the act. He pointed at Shino and said, "I am going to win, believe it." Kurama couldn't wait to end the little charade, but for now a few words and a few idiotic gestures would prevent suspicion. Shino remained stoic and kept his guard up. Kurama glided forward and used a basic set of academy kicks that were near enough on point that they prevented Shino from ending it immediately. Shino's blocks were textbook and provided no openings. Kurama attempted a leg sweep that Shino narrowly avoided. As Shino was on his back foot from the dodge, Kurama decided to see if he could actually score a point. The body was Naruto's. The recent change in diet and exercise wasn't going to make much of a difference yet. The muscle memory was Naruto's as well, but the intellect was far different. Kurama knew what he had to work with, and while it wasn't much, it was enough for a minor victory. Kurama exploded forward, propelling himself from the ground. Unlike his earlier ill-timed flying kick, this was a surprise. To his credit, Shino still had his guard up, but dodging wasn't possible. Naruto led with his forearms and slammed into Shino's guard. Shino was surprised by the sudden collision and hit the ground hard, while Kurama was able to roll over Shino and come back up standing. The attack wasn't elegant, and in a real battle all it would take was the enemy to lash out with a kunai to make it a bad idea, but it had worked. Naruto had a point and the crowd was surprised. Naruto nearly always lost, usually without scoring a point. Shino wasn't distressed and simply got up and went on the offensive. A few sloppy blocks lead to a kick to a knife hand to the midsection and the match was over. Shino had won with about 30 seconds to spare. Kurama paid attention to the next bouts, but little of interest occurred. The day was coming to a close and Kurama was pleased with his actions. He hadn't murdered any of the vermin and had maintained his cover. He would slowly change the perceptions everyone had of the boy. He would not tolerate being dead last. He would need to rise through the shinobi ranks at a decent clip. Kurama desired to find the jutsu and knowledge needed to never again be trapped with fuinjutsu or enslaved by the Sharingan. Once he had that, well then he could truly balance the scales and vent his fury. Anko was easily able to spot Naruto when the academy students were dismissed. He wasn't much to look at. He was shorter than most of the rest of his class with messy hair and a hideous orange jumpsuit. He moved slowly and looked around searching for his new instructor. She let him look for a bit while the crowd of kids dispersed and then she approached him. "You must be Naruto. I am Anko Mitarashi, your new trainer." Kurama looked up at the instructor the old man had found for Naruto. Her slightly too loud and enthusiastic voice annoyed him immediately. He studied her without making it obvious and his second impression was slightly better. The woman's muscles were lean and well honed. She carried herself with an easy grace that spoke of her abilities. There were a shocking number of weapons hidden on her person. The Sandaime had found a competent instructor. That was good. It meant it would be less surprising when he began to improve rapidly. "Hey Anko, I hope you're strong." "And why do you say that?" "Because if you aren't strong someone will kill you because you're training me." Anko laughed. "Kid, you don't have to worry about that. Didn't I already tell you my name is Anko Mitarashi?" Kurama honestly couldn't recall the name. Torture and interrogation specialists didn't hang around the academy and it wasn't like villagers gossiped with Naruto. So I guess you're strong." Anko stared at him for a few seconds and then slumped. "Wow, I guess you really haven't heard of me." Kurama wasn't certain if the kunoichi was seriously dejected or if she was play acting. Mitarashi remained that way for a few moments but then smiled. "I am the beautiful, deadly and amazing Anko Mitarashi. You don't have to worry about anyone harming me because I am training you. I am a Tokubetsu Jonin and a damned scary one too. I eat rank missions for breakfast and no one dares mess with me. Now follow me." Anko broke out into a light run that Kurama followed after a moment. The run didn't last long. In about 10 minutes they were in one of the training fields that wasn't currently being used. "You got some stamina, good." Kurama smirked internally. Naruto's body had only stamina because a biju was inside of it. If it wasn't for that the malnourished child would probably have been panting and wheezing, but that would soon change. The steady diet and conditioning would make his host's body strong. "All right kid, let's see what you got. Try to hit me." Kurama considered how Naruto would react and decided that he probably would have accepted the offer and attacked, and so he did just that. He led off with a Naruto-style punch, essentially an academy punch but with far too much force and weight behind it as he threw his entire body into it. Anko easily slipped away from the punch. Before Kurama could continue, Anko ordered him to stop. "What the hell was that? Are you training to be a shinobi or a drunken civilian in a bar?" Kurama inwardly chuckled at her comment. "What are you talking about? I am going to be a strong shinobi. If that punch would have hit you would have gone down." Anko suppressed a sigh and maintained her jocular facade. Honestly, trying not to smack the ignorant kid was getting hard. That punch was useless and he was trying to defend it. All the power in the world isn't going to help if you can't actually make contact, and a punch like that could be dodged easily. Do you know why? Kurama shook his head though he knew full well that the attack was too obviously telegraphed. "Because your arm said it was going to punch, your shoulder said it was going to punch, your entire body told me before your fist was even on its way that it was going to punch." Kurama stared blankly at his trainer. Only her infiltration and covert op training prevented Anko from grinding her teeth. "I am telling you that you made it obvious, and since you made it obvious I could avoid it." "Oh, why didn't you just say so in the first place?" Anko forced her facial muscles to relax and calmed the urge to strangle the runt. "Let's just move on. Your next problem is that because you brought your arm backwards the blow was too slow. When you punch you never pull back. The extra power isn't worth the loss of time. Here, I'll show you." Anko punched the air swiftly. She kept the speed slow enough so the pre-genin's eyes could see it. Her shoulder had barely moved but there was obvious power behind the blow. "Yeah, but I bet you would have more power if you pulled your arm back like I did." Kurama laughed as the Jonin tried to hide her anger. Kurama was amused by how irritated he was making her. In fairness, if he wasn't a biju and was actually an academy student he would never have been able to tell. She was quite good at controlling her facial muscles and her eyes. Unless you're Tsunade of the Sannin or an Akamichi, forget about brute force. A shinobi strikes with precision. A fast punch that connects is worth the 1,000 of your punches that will never hit. Kurama continued to bait her. "Yeah, but if it did hit it would be awesome." Anko stared at him for a few moments before finally saying, "Maybe I am going about this the wrong way, Naruto. You wanted extra training and I am going to give it to you. Try my way and I guarantee you that your academy spars will go better. Kurama decided he had enough amusement for now and nodded his head. Enko smiled brightly and began having Naruto practice punches that were focused more on speed than on power. After about 20 minutes she was pleased with his progress and moved on to working with his kicks. They finished their first hour together going over basic combinations with his new repertoire of punches and kicks. Using these types of attacks will improve your taijutsu and they make up the basic building blocks for the rest of the moves I'll be showing you. Time to see how well you can mold chakra. Make a bunshin for me. Kurama actually couldn't make a regular bunshin even if he wanted to. The minuscule amount of chakra required to perform it was too small to measure out. Other jutsu could be overloaded with chakra with minimal implications. If he overloaded a kawarimi for example it would just created an excess amount of smoke and noise, but if you overloaded a bunshin it produced clones that couldn't hold themselves together. Kurama did as was asked and slowly formed the ram, snake and then tiger seal. The clone appeared next to him about 10 shades paler than it was supposed to and immediately dropped to the ground and then like a deflated balloon began to shrink in on itself and then dissipate. The violet-haired woman quirked an eyebrow. Try that again. Kurama did so with no better results. Again, failure. Again, failure. Again, failure. Kurama was starting to grow annoyed with the woman. Couldn't she tell that this wasn't working? After a dozen attempts she finally said, "You are using way too much chakra. Did Iruka go over the leaf exercise with you yet?" Kurama thought back into Naruto's memories. Yes he had though Naruto hadn't paid much attention. "I think so but I don't remember it too well." "That's fine. We are going to use a variation of it that might be a bit easier anyway." Enko took a leaf from a nearby tree and had Naruto hold his palm out. She placed the leaf on his hand and said, "The easiest place to channel chakra is your hands. They are the most tactile part of your body. They are your primary means of interacting with the world. I want you to focus your chakra on your hand so that the leaf gently rises up." In the last few days Kurama had been practicing the standard leaf concentration exercise. He hadn't made much progress and that was reflected here as the leaf suddenly launched into the air. Enko laughed. "You have some power there kid but like your punch we need you to learn control." Kurama copied Naruto's mannerism and rubbed the back of his head with his hand in faux embarrassment. His instructor grabbed a handful of leaves and handed them to Naruto. "Practice with these at least an hour a day. Once you've mastered that well move on to channeling chakra into other parts of your body like your forehead and eventually your feet." "Okay I can do that. Well meet tomorrow after your classes. See you then kid." Enko disappeared in a whirl of leaves leaving Kurama alone. Well not exactly. Kurama knew that 4 Anbu still trailed him everywhere he went. Since the murders of the ramen stand owners more skilled Anbu stalked him, he knew there were 4 but one of them would sometimes be completely gone from his enhanced senses, and so Kurama dutifully practiced for about 30 minutes and then stopped working on his chakra control and began working on his punches and kicks. Naruto grew bored easily and this was perfectly in character in Kurama's mind. Once he returned to the dingy apartment he would make up for lost time with chakra control. *break*. Enko stormed into the torture and interrogation compound. Her colleagues saw that she was in one of her moods and wisely kept their distance. "Ibiki, tell me we have someone to torture today." Ibiki Morino, the head of Konoha Intelligence Division, was the only one in the building not intimidated. "Yeah we have a couple of small fries that need to be roughed up a bit, not important though, they'll crack in a few days anyway. Do you need them alive afterwards?" Ibiki shook his head. Spies, even incompetent and relatively harmless ones were rarely allowed to live. "Good, I'll be out in a few hours." Ibiki nodded. He didn't take pleasure in his work like Enko did. Some would find her joy in the breaking of another person as disturbing but he knew individuals performed better when they did something they loved. She took the key to the cell and glanced at the file. Ibiki allowed her to do what she wanted as long as she got results. She would need to be sure to get the information while she had her fun. Enko opened the door of the cell revealing a petite female. The girl was relatively attractive though she didn't have many curves. She had been sleeping with a Chunin and trying to ferret out information. When her questions started to rouse suspicion the Chunin informed the T&I division and they came and picked her up. The initial questioning revealed little except that the little mole was a bad liar. She entered the cell that held the girl who went by the name Margie. The girl wasn't a shinobi so her hands had not even been restrained. Anko wasted little time and grabbed the terrified girl by the hair. She shoved her face first into the wall. She hissed in her ear, "Tell me who sent you." The panicked woman lied. "No one. I am moved here and wanted to find a good shinobi who could provide for me. My family is poor and..." Anko took out a kunai and placed it against her captive's cheek. She let it bite into her skin. The girl tried to jerk away but Anko's grip was firm. The cut wasn't terribly deep but it hurt and it would hurt worse as Anko put more force behind it, pushing the kunai up hard against the cheekbone. The girl sobbed in terror and Anko licked her lips. It wouldn't take much more to break her. Too easy. "Tell me who sent you." "Oh Kami, I swear no one did. I just moved here to find a good shinobi who could provide." The kunai ripped down her face a couple of inches, scarring the once pretty girl. She shrieked with pain and her legs tried to collapse but the torture specialist easily held her up by her hair. "Tell me who sent you." "Stop. I'll tell you, please just stop." Anko grinned. "What a weakling. Talk," she snarled. Margie informed her that she had been approached by a man with money. She knew he was from another village but didn't wear a forehead protector. He wanted to know information about the village. Margie told Anko that the man specifically wanted to know about any missions that involved shinobi going to Kase no Kuni, Land of Wind. The man had given her a cover story, that of a woman looking to settle down with a shinobi. After she got as much information as she could in 3 months she would be contacted and could leave with enough money to avoid working or be dependent on anyone. Once Anko had gotten all of the information that she needed, she hoisted the girl back up by the hair. "I told you everything. No more, please." Anko smirked. "I believe you." Screams echoed through the cell and down the hallway for the next 30 minutes. "I suppose I better go make the report." Anko left the girl sobbing. It was always amusing causing pain after her victims had confessed all they knew. Occasionally she liked to pretend that she didn't believe them. The frantic pleadings were so fervent because they still had hope she would stop if only they could get her to believe. But most of the time she just enjoyed seeing the horrified realization that had been etched onto Margie's face. The hopelessness of knowing that there was nothing in the world that could make the pain stop delighted her to no end. After she left the cell she reported into Ibiki. "We have a description of the person who sent her but it was likely a shinobi under a henge." The little shit didn't know anything else, including why they were interested in learning about missions to Suna territory. Ibiki knew that the Wind Daimyo had sent business to Konoha that normally would have gone Sunagaku. Agents from Suna could be doing anything from trying to understand the scope of the missions they were losing to actively trying to ambush Konoha shinobi undertaking those missions. Hell, it could even be a false flag operation by one of Suna's enemies. They just didn't have enough information to work on. "Good to know. What's with your mood today?" Anko sighed. "Babysitting duty on orders from the Hokage. I have to train the Kyuubi container. I feel for the little guy but his mouth makes me want to knock his teeth out." Ibiki chuckled. "I see, so you decided to come in even though you weren't on shift to relieve some stress." Anko winked. "Got it in one, boss man. It's almost as if you're good at reading people or something." Ibiki waved off her playful banter. "All right, I'll have the prisoner executed. Why don't you go blow off steam doing something normal?" She shook her head. "Not my style. I'll go back and finish the prisoner. I'll deliver her body in about 5 or 6 hours." Ibiki simply nodded but Shinobu Mibu stood up. "What is wrong with you? You have all of the information you need. Give her a clean death." Shinobu was a chunin who had recently joined the intelligence division. He was brave and still slightly naive despite having been in the shinobi world for a few years doing missions. He still thought that Konoha was as pure and decent as their propaganda claimed. Anko looked at him incredulously. "Ibiki, are you seeing what I am seeing? Did this little chunin just try to defend a known spy? Do you think he might be in cahoots?" Shinobu took a heavy swallow. "That's insane. I've severed Konoha for years. I would never betray the will of fire." Anko sashayed towards him and Shinobu flinched slightly as her hand touched his face. "Did she seduce you too? Are you weak to that form of persuasion? Should I interrogate you next?" The chunin was growing more and more alarmed. He kept sending nervous glances at Ibiki's impassive face. Ibiki finally interrupted saying, "Enough Anko, stick to terrorizing our actual enemies." "No fun at all Ibiki. I wasn't going to hurt him, much." Shinobu sat back down and didn't say another word as Anko merrily whistled down the hall to Margie's cell. Margie looked up and saw her tormentor. "I don't know anything more. I swear, Please just let me go." She laughed at her prisoner. "How stupid are you? You attempted to spy on our village, your sentence is death." Margie collapsed into sobs. Anko simply watched her. After a few minutes the girl finally stopped crying and she looked up. "Okay, do it, I won't fight, just please make it quick." Anko struggled to keep a straight face. "Make it quick, oh you stupid little girl, I don't plan on leaving this cell for a long time." Margie's eyes widened and Anko could see the whites clearly. She stumbled away from Anko, utter terror in her eyes. Anko drank it in and Margie saw the shimmers of insanity in Anko's brown eyes. Margie began to scream as Anko approached. When Anko began, the screams grew shriller and echoed the halls and into Shinobu's ears, but that wasn't what disturbed him most. What scared the Chunin was Anko's laughter. ****. Kurama practiced his chakra control while he thought about the day. He had felt pain, his host's pain, not his own. He was no stranger to pain. The previous binding while within Kushina had been hellish, but he had never felt his host's pain before. Why would he feel it now? After more thought, Kurama eventually decided that it was a symptom of his unique situation. He had never actually lived as a Jinchuriki before. While he was a passive observer, he felt none of Naruto's pain or pleasure. While he was in control, Naruto's senses now became his senses. He could feel pain as well as comfort. It was unsettling but interesting. It was unique, and with as long as Kurama had been alive he found that unique experiences were appealing. Kurama had no desire to live out the life of Naruto any longer than necessary, but perhaps it wouldn't be as aggravating as he first thought. After his chakra control exercises and daily conditioning within the safe confines of his apartment, he ate his nutritious meal. Taste was something he had never noticed, but now the flavors made him smile. "As much as I am finding delight in this, I know that it is a double-edged sword. Will I encounter food that I find distasteful?" Kurama wasn't sure but opted to see if he could mask the sense of taste. He could not. He shrugged. Compared to the tortuous bindings he had suffered through and occasional pain, malodorous smell or foul-tasting food would not be a concern. What was a concern was getting stronger. Private tutoring, a renewed desire to get stronger in order to protect people, and a better diet would all allow him to rapidly gain strength and ability without suspicion. Kurama smiled as he practiced the kicks and punches Anko had shown him. Everything was going according to plan. The next day at the academy was much the same as the previous one. Kurama play acting Naruto attempting to pay attention. He ignored most of the other children's barbs and fondly thought of ripping them to pieces. He fondly fantasized about murdering them in ever-increasingly painful ways. It wasn't just the ones that taunted him that aggravated the Biju. Choji's chip eating was incessant and drove him to distraction. But beyond the petty annoyances and barbs, the one person the nine-tailed fox wanted to kill was the Uchiha. Oh, the arrogance and smug confidence was irritating, but that didn't truly gall Kurama. No, what galled him were those eyes that held the potential to enslave him. He, the greatest of all the Biju, could have his mind subjected to a mortal's whim. As his fury grew, so did his resolve not to break cover. He would keep up the charade. After class his personal tutor met him for practice. "All right Gaki, did you work on your chakra exercises?" Kurama nodded and said, "I did. Can I learn some really strong jutsu now?" Naruto had paid little attention in class until it came time to discuss jutsu. Naruto had always been disappointed by the type of jutsu he was taught in the academy. He wanted flashy, powerful jutsu. Kurama would keep up the act. Anko rolled her eyes. "You kids think a powerful jutsu is all you need to be a shinobi?" Well, yeah. Kurama could tell his Naruto acting was annoying Mitarashi despite how effectively she was hiding it. It was fast becoming his favorite game. Could he get his tutor riled up enough to lose it? The young torture specialist was getting annoyed but would have been shocked to learn that anyone could have sensed it. Anko's hand moved in a blur and a senbon flew straight into Naruto's shoulder. Kurama had seen the attack coming but could have done little to stop it without pulling on his own chakra. The separation in speed and power between an academy student and an experienced shinobi was vast. "Ow, that hurt." She smiled at him. "Don't be a baby, it's not any worse than a needle. When the brat slumps down unconscious, I'll give him the antidote and he'll see just how deadly a simple needle can be." Stupid brat, carrying on about jutsu when he would be dead in a second against a real shinobi. It was a lesson she had planned ahead of time, though it had come up sooner than she had expected. It might shake the boy up a bit, but the Sandame wouldn't be too annoyed. After all, it wasn't like she was using an actual lethal poison. The problem was that Naruto wasn't falling down. Kurama chuckled inside as he felt the knockout drug attempt to work. Not even the real Naruto would have fallen down from it. The chakra flowing through his body was powerful enough to prevent the venom from working. He wasn't immune to all poison, but it would take more than that to lay him low. So are we going to train or what? Anko blinked and mumbled something under her breath that made the fox demon snicker from inside his host. The kunoichi knew that Jinchuriki had superior vitality but didn't think it would negate the knockout drug. Her plan foiled, she decided it was time for petty revenge. All right, you stupid brat, this will show you. I think it's time I tested the knowledge you gained in the academy. Kurama couldn't help but be amused at Anko's reaction. He was fairly certain that she hadn't planned on lecturing Naruto for the next couple of hours, but since she had been thwarted earlier, she was now attempting to irritate and torment Naruto with even more boring training. His esteem of her actually went up. She was quite amusing, really. What? You're supposed to train me and make me strong. Don't turn into Iruka-sensei, no. She laughed at the boy's tantrum. Knowledge is the root of all power, so I am going to make sure you have all the knowledge you need. And so 2 hours passed with Anko picking the most boring subjects to review. How was chakra paper made? Well, it was made by special trees that had to be carefully cultivated. There were 2 camps on the best way to care for those trees. One school of thought said that the trees should be pruned regularly to better conserve the chakra at the core, and they were opposed by traditionalists who believed it should grow as naturally as possible. Anko discussed the pros and cons of each method, and on she droned. Kurama couldn't help but be impressed. You really had to work to be that boring, and somehow she was content in boring herself just to watch the frustration Kurama allowed to appear on Naruto's face. Of all the pathetic villagers here, I think I hate her the least. The next day brought with it another painful day at the academy. The classroom was full of little annoyances. The clan children each had some characteristic that aggravated him. But it wasn't they alone who were the issue. In fact, in some ways the civilians were a good deal more annoying. One civilian boy was the Uchiha wannabe. The waste of space styled his hair like Sasuke. He watched Sasuke and mimicked his taijutsu and even tried to throw shuriken and kunai like Sasuke. It was well and truly pathetic. The boy's name was Noboru, and Kurama decided that he would consider him an honorary Uchiha when he eventually exterminated the filthy bloodline. If he wanted to act like an Uchiha, he could die like one. Even though it had only been a couple of days, his sparring match against the Uchiha wannabe went fairly well. Kurama held back in the fight. While his strength and speed were inferior, his superior senses could compensate for that. His fighting stances and forms were deliberately sloppy compared to the absolute precision that his superior mind would have let him perform it. Instead, he got in a solid kick to the boy's ribs and a punch to the shoulder before getting hit by the boy for the 3rd time. He lost but knew he could have won. Noboru took his win silently, just like Sasuke typically did. He even walked away in the same arrogant fashion. Kurama vowed that next time he would beat the little shit bloody. As the pretend Naruto took his place with the other kids, the Hyuga girl fumbled with her hands and finally shyly looked at him. "You did a good job, Naruto." Kurama looked at the weak girl and wondered what Naruto would have said. It was quite rare for him to be complimented by his peers. No, not just rare, it never happened. He decided to go with sullen but determined. "No, I didn't. I lost." The young heiress looked taken aback until Naruto continued. "But I will win eventually. I am going to get stronger, and then I'll make sure no one will be able to harm my friends again." Kurama rolled his eyes internally. Naruto didn't have any friends, but it sounded good and fit with the overarching view he wanted Konoha to have of Uzumaki. Finally, the academy day was over and it was time for Kurama to have his daily training with his tutor. Anko was munching on some dango when Kurama made it to the training ground. "All right, shrimp. Now that I filled your head with knowledge, let's do some more work on your fighting stance." Kurama did as instructed and the session was productive. While Kurama could learn on his own perfectly fine, it was helpful to have a second set of eyes. Anko knew her business, and the attacks she was showing Naruto were not from the academy style. They were focused more on striking fast and at vital points or nerve clusters. "These attacks are all weird, like none of the academy sensei does it like this." And the day had started so nice, Anko thought. The little brat was actually being cooperative, and then he had to open his big mouth. "Well, Gaki, the attacks are different because I am teaching you a different fighting style. You remember what the academy taught you about different fighting styles?" Kurama did recall some talk about it. The academy taught the academy fighting style, which was primarily basics that were aimed at incapacitation instead of killing. There were other styles Iruka had mentioned. The Juken, Gentle Fist, was what the Hyuga clan used. The Goken, Strong Fist, was another fighting style, and the other fighting style he could recall learning about was the Saru no Ken, Monkey's Fist, that the Hokage specialized in. The Gentle Fist style was graceful and focused on using chakra to disrupt an opponent's chakra network as well as cause internal damage. The Strong Fist style was about hard and fast attacks. It was primarily an offensive style that took advantage of speed and power to deliver devastating attacks that could break bones. The Monkey's Fist was focused on grappling attacks. Kurama knew all of this, but it wouldn't fit Naruto's profile to remember all of that. Yes, some styles are about kicking and others are about punching. Anko struggled not to twitch. She kept a calm and peaceful facade that didn't fool Kurama for a moment. I guess I'll have to explain the major fighting styles to you. Anko basically said the same thing that Kurama had been thinking, except she also added in the style she used. I use the Hubby, Snake style. The focus of the style is to strike quickly and lethally. It is about precision rather than brute force. So it's like the Juken, Gentle Fist, but without the cool chakra blocking thing. Anko shook her head. Not the same at all. The Hubby style is so much more. It is about blocking and attacking slightly slower than your precision attack. It is about using your eyes and body to send false signals to the enemy. It is about using your whole body and making it as limber as possible. We've barely scratched the surface, kid. Anko saw Naruto look doubtful. I think Goken might be better because it has the word strong in it. Must not kill my student. Must not kill my student. She forced a smile and replied, I don't teach that style, so you'll just have to take my training and you can always change styles in the future. Kurama laughed from deep within his host's psyche. She was practically quivering with rage. Most shinobi would be able to tell, but it was doubtful an academy student would pick it up. Fine, but you still need to teach me a good jutsu. And by good jutsu I assume you mean a ninjutsu. Yeah, like how to breathe fire like Sasuke Tem. Most shinobi don't learn their chakra affinity until they are chunin, and you aren't even a genin yet. Chakra affinity. Anko rubbed her forehead. I know by now they would have taught you about chakra affinities. It's part of the theory in the second year. Kurama scratched his head embarrassedly. I must have forgot. Kurama hadn't forgotten, but the actual Naruto had fallen asleep. Anko sighed. You need to go back through your academy texts and learn about it. And no, I won't be teaching you elemental ninjutsu. When you have become proficient on the basics of the Hubby style and you have better chakra control, I might, maybe, just possibly teach you a ninjutsu, but it won't be how to breathe fire. Kurama kicked the ground dejectedly, pantomiming what the real Naruto would have done. Kurama was curious to see what Naruto's affinities would be. The Kaiden affinity was the most common in Hi-no-Kuni, Fire Country, but that didn't guarantee anything. With the amount of chakra in Naruto's body, ninjutsu would be a strong weapon. Many shinobi could only use a few ninjutsu before becoming exhausted. That would not be a problem for Kurama. For the rest of the day they worked on chakra control and then they went their separate ways. Kurama returned to the apartment and continued his conditioning and chakra control exercises. Chakra control was a daunting task as very little of his experience in his natural form carried over. He was determined, however, and his mind was very focused. Progress was slow, but incrementally he was gaining greater control. For the rest of the week Anko continued to work on the basics of his taijutsu style. Kurama respected the fighting style and could see how it would flummox the other academy students easily enough. Chakra control continued damnably slow. Academy lessons were 6 days a week with 1 day off. That day Kurama had no lessons with Anko or in the academy. Instead there was a knock on the door. When Kurama opened it he saw the smiling face of the Sandaime Hokage. Gigi. Ah, Naruto-kun, how was your first week back at the academy? Kurama shrugged. It was all right. I learned a lot more with Anko though. Wonderful. I am happy to hear that. Would you like to get something to eat? Kurama allowed a dark look to cross Naruto's visage that was followed with a short nod. Sure Gigi, let me do this first though. Kurama carefully made the dog, boar and ram seals needed to use Henge no Jutsu. Naruto disappeared and in his place was a slightly taller boy with brownish hair and gray eyes. Hiruzen instantly knew why Naruto was doing this. Considering the amount of discrimination the boy faced, it was a logical move. It was a shinobi move. He just hated the fact that he felt it necessary. Kurama thoroughly enjoyed the sad look in the elderly monk's eyes. Neither said anything for a few moments as they walked toward one of Konoha's restaurants. The Hokage decided to take him to a casual diner where ramen was only one of several options. He did not want to make Naruto think he was trying to find a replacement for ramen Ichiraku. He thought that it was a good idea when Naruto didn't order ramen. Instead he ordered sushi with a tray of greens. I am glad to see you eating healthier, Naruto-kun. Kurama smiled weakly and twisted the knife. I need to be strong. I like having friends, but I won't allow myself to make any until I've gotten really strong. You said vegetables will make me strong, so I eat them all the time. Hiruzen couldn't help but feel an ache of sadness every time he talked with Naruto. The deaths of Tsuki and his daughter had obviously made their mark on the boy. The silver lining in the clouds was that he was taking his ninja training seriously now. It had been less than 2 weeks and already Naruto seemed to have a healthier glow about him. So what has Anko-san been teaching you? Kurama ate another big mouthful of fish and then replied, lots of stuff. She's teaching me to fight differently. I can tell my kicks and punches are getting faster. She also does boring stuff like Iruka-sensei. Sarutobi chuckled. Naruto was still Naruto behind his serious shinobi training mask. Say Gigi, can you teach me a really cool ninjutsu? Anko says I am not ready and I have to do a lot of stuff before she says she'll even think about it. The Hokage smiled patiently. Naruto, Anko is your part-time sensei now. If she thinks it best you wait, then you should wait. Kurama sullenly nodded. He debated about starting to shed tears about how he really need a new jutsu to get stronger, but he felt it would be a bit over the top. Best not to pile it on too thick, even the senile old fool might catch on after a while. Ah Gigi, that's not fair. I really want to learn how to breathe fire like Sasuke Tem. The two discussed it back and forth for a time and soon enough their meal was over and it was time for the Hokage to get back to work. Naruto, I want you to keep practicing with Anko-san, and keep eating your vegetables and paying attention in class. I know you will be a great shinobi. I believe in you. Kurama howled with laughter. Their Naruto was dead. It was only him, the nine-tailed fox. Hopefully the old man wouldn't croak before it was time to reveal to him that Naruto was long gone. That pleasant thought was with him all the way back to the apartment where he continued his training. ****. Today we are going to learn about poison, Anko told her student. Another week of training had passed and Naruto continued to improve with his taijutsu. He had even beaten one of the civilian kids in the academy spars. She knew he had a long way to go, but his improvement had impressed her. Kurama wasn't incredibly curious about poison. While he roamed around as the Kyuubi, he preferred direct confrontation. If you're strong you don't need to use poison. The torture expert wanted to take back all the nice things she had just thought about her student. Yes, the kid was starting to grasp the hubby style, but he still had an obnoxious mouth on him. He said what popped into his head without any forethought. In a way Anko liked the kid's unpredictability, but part of being a shinobi was misdirection and she feared he would never learn it. Are you always going to be the strongest? I will be one day. Believe it. Anko tried a different tack. Are you the strongest now? Well, no. Will you be the strongest tomorrow? He shook his head. What about next week or next month? No. He kicked the ground. So until you are the strongest you will learn how to use poison. It can be an edge you need to win a fight against a stronger shinobi. Also sometimes your missions as a shinobi will call on you killing something without violence. Poison slipped into a rebellious noble that makes it look like he died of natural causes is far better than slitting his throat and making him a martyr. Kurama allowed Naruto's eyes to grow wide. Once more he was impressed by the kunoichi in front of him. She knew her craft and was an excellent sensei. That didn't mean he was going to stop needling her. Okay, I'll learn how to use poison. She went on to explain some of the milder toxins she would be working with him on. One general use poison is what we like to call the knockout drug. It's quite safe to use against almost all targets and it simply knocks them unconscious for a short period of time. So is it a poison or a drug? Anko shrugged. I am not a medical nin, so I don't know the practical difference. Really, if it does something to interfere with your enemy's body then I call it a poison. I use drug, poison and toxin interchangeably. They discussed the placement of the poison on various weapons. Putting it on a kunai wasn't ideal since a kunai could leave a large wound. Instead the ideal weapon was a senbon. Needles. Those seem like girly weapons. Without thinking Anko backhanded Naruto hard. Kurama was in pain and tasted blood but internally was crowing at his victory. He had made her lose her temper. It was glorious. He caught a flash of panic on Anko's face before she carefully hid it and grinned down at the fallen academy student. "What did I tell you about keeping your guard up? If I was an enemy in a henge you could be dead by now." Kurama chuckled internally at this. She was going to play it off like it was a training exercise instead of an angry attack at an insubordinate student. Fine with him. He didn't actually want to lose out on the training. It would allow him to become a better shinobi, so in the field he would not have to reveal his identity by tapping into his own chakra. Kurama got to his feet and wiped the blood from Naruto's mouth and looked at his tutor. Anko moved on. "Have you ever used a senbon before?" Kurama shook his head. They finished their training that day practicing with senbon and learning about various poisons and toxins that could be used. Anko was going to provide Naruto with several doses of the knockout drug as well as a mild poison that acted as a blood thinner that made wounds bleed more easily. Neither was dangerous if he used it on others. The knockout drug is a common tool, so many shinobi have learned to use chakra to neutralize it. It's almost mandatory training for Chunin in Konoha, but not all hidden villages are as familiar with it. The final thing Anko did was give him a botany book on various plants that could be harvested to create poisons. "I hate reading." The urge to hit him came back, but this time she suppressed it. "Finish it by the end of the week unless you want another lecture on where chakra paper comes from." Kurama grumbled and agreed to the task, and they parted ways. Secretly, and to his own surprise, Kurama actually found the use of poison fascinating. He devoured the book upon his return to the apartment. Simple plants could be harvested and parts of them used to create substances that could easily kill any shinobi. Why didn't more shinobi use them? The sheer variety and lethality of poison made it almost impossible to have antidotes for all of them on hand. The next day at the academy, Kurama's ears were once again assaulted with a loud argument about who would get to sit next to Sasuke-kun. Ino and Sakura had this argument daily, and Kurama wondered if the arrogant bastard deliberately picked a seat at the end of a road just so that argument could take place. Kurama seriously considered going out and finding a belladonna root and cramming it into their loud mouths. Hardly subtle, but it would forever silence the banshees. Iruka entered the class and angrily told the two would-be kunoichi to sit in the back. "Great. They are going to be next to me now." Kurama saw Noboru take the seat next to Sasuke. Sakura sat down and said, I have to sit next to Naruto baka." "I do too." Billboard brow. "But it was your fault, Ino pig. I was the one who saw the seat first." Kurama sat there in between the two pre-teen girls as they argued about who saw the seat next to Sasuke first. "The seal that held me within Kushina was the worst torture I had ever experienced in my existence. Until now." Iruka saved him from his torment by yelling at the pair to be quiet. The class was now able to begin. The lesson today was about shinobi rank classification in bingo books. They weren't given bingo books themselves but watched Iruka write things down on the board. "There are 4 threat level classifications we give shinobi. Can anyone tell me what they are?" Sakura raised her hand and promptly answered. "The ranks are C, B, A and S." "Very good. Now someone else explain why we don't have a D rank." Ino didn't want to be trumped by her rival, answered immediately. "If someone is a D rank then they aren't going to be part of a bingo book." Iruka nodded. "Exactly. Now remember, the rank in a bingo book doesn't mean someone is a genin or a chunin. Some shinobi may graduate from the academy already quite skilled but have not yet had time to take the chunin exams. In other cases, a very strong shinobi could have suffered an illness or injury that greatly reduced their ability to fight. They would keep their rank in their village, be it chunin or jonin, but might get downgraded in the bingo books." Kurama found this discussion to be incredibly basic and unimportant. He could have gotten the same information with a few minutes of reading. Nonetheless, it did spark his curiosity. What was Anko ranked as? After the lecture part of the day was finished, it was time for more accuracy practice with kunai and shuriken, and then it was time for sparring. This time Naruto was up against Ino. "I'll bruise her larynx, just for the peace and quiet." Kurama assumed the academy-style stance while Ino did likewise. The hubby style didn't require a specific stance. The Yamanaka clan did not have their own personalized taijutsu style since their clan teachings were more mentally focused. Ino had beaten Naruto often in fights and was looking forward to doing it again. She was the top kunoichi in the class when it came to taijutsu, and she could hold her own against most of the boys as well. Not her Sasuke-kun of course, but no one could beat him. Ino confidently delivered a snap kick that missed Naruto by an inch as he slid to the side. Ino was surprised when Naruto delivered a sharp punch that she was only barely able to block. Naruto pushed in close and delivered an elbow to the head that forced Ino to back up or take a hard blow. Ino's footing was less sure and her ability to attack was lowered when she had to back up. Naruto crowded her and didn't allow her time to regain momentum. The punches came light and fast, zooming in at slightly different angles than she was used to. After 30 seconds she finally saw an opening and lashed out with her own attack. Kurama had anticipated the attack and was already moving perpendicular to the strike. For the first time in the match he performed a kick and it caught Ino in the throat. The blow brought her hands to her neck as she rubbed it. Iruka hastily ran over and checked to make sure there wasn't a serious injury. There was none, though she coughed a few times and it sounded painful. The crowd of students was surprised by Naruto's aggressiveness. Shikamaru narrowed his eyes. That wasn't the academy style at all, and based on what he had seen, the attack to her neck was deliberate. He found Ino troublesome, but their families were close. Kurama smirked at the idea of the blonde not being able to speak well for the next few days. The match continued and Ino had a determined look in her eyes. She sprang forward and started with some rapid-fire kicks. The nine-tailed fox backed away from the kicks, letting Ino tire herself out. A kick could have more power and range than a punch, but it was more exhausting. It also was difficult to follow up the attack unless your opponent stood and blocked it. As Ino grew frustrated, she charged forward. The class saw Naruto back up a step and then thrust forward instantly with a sharp jab to Ino's midsection. Ino, surprised by the speed of the attack, missed her block. She doubled over in pain and Kurama backed up. The second point was his. Hiba looked on. Hey, when did the Dobi get so good? Kurama was actually surprised by how easily he was beating Ino. She's unused to this style. Let's see how far I have progressed without it. Kurama decided to fight only using the moves taught in the academy. Ino changed up her tactics again and led with a light punch to the face. The Kyuubi blocked the punch with a textbook block and attempted to sweep her legs. Ino did a slight hop and delivered a strong kick to Naruto as he was rising up from the sweep. Kurama put his arms up blocking the blow. He was pushed back a couple of feet but no point was scored. They both came back together trading punches and kicks. Kurama had improved a good deal in just a couple of weeks but was still unable to score a point quickly. Instead, Ino actually surprised him by feinting a punch to the midsection and turning it into a grab of his jumpsuit. When he responded with the appropriate block, she pulled him forward and pushed him off balance so he was not in position to block the second punch from her other arm. The class cheered. They didn't like Naruto much and the world was made right when he started to lose against his opponent. The fox decided to quell those cheers by reverting back to the hubby style. Ino had her confidence again and she started off with a blistering barrage of punches interspersed with kicks. Kurama drifted in and out of the dance at odd angles and used circular blocks as opposed to the more direct and forceful blocks the academy taught. Ino soon found her hands not where she wanted them and unable to defend herself from a sharp elbow to her ribs that connected with some force. Iruka called the match. Naruto had won his second spar and this time it was against a clan heir. Their teacher was very curious about the fighting style that was used. Congratulations Naruto. Ino isn't an easy opponent. After the rest of the spars I'd like to talk to you. Kurama gave Iruka one of the happy-go-lucky Naruto smiles and replied, sure Iruka-sensei. After the rest of the spars Iruka let the rest of the class go while he spoke with Naruto. Naruto, I have a couple of questions for you. Kurama again responded, sure Iruka-sensei. Did you see how awesome my spar was? I am finally getting strong. He congratulated Naruto but then said, Naruto, where did you learn how to fight like that? Oh, Anko-sensei taught me. She says it's the hubby's style. Iruka was surprised and probed further, learning that it was the Hokage who had arranged the additional tutoring. Iruka wouldn't question the Hokage's wisdom, but Mitarashi had a disturbing reputation. Still, it seemed like her training had worked wonders for the boy's taijutsu. One last question Naruto, did you deliberately aim for Ino's throat? Kurama had several ways he could answer but quickly chose the more entertaining one. The Chunin looked on as the boy's face grew flushed. The boy looked very uncomfortable and Iruka grew alarmed. Dealing a blow like that to a fellow academy student was dangerous and very unlike Naruto's kind-natured demeanor, and then Naruto erupted. It isn't my fault. I didn't know I was supposed to eat my vegetables. What? Iruka asked puzzled. I never ate my vegetables. Gigi told me if ate better I would grow bigger. I was too short to reach her face with my kick because no one told me the bad-tasting food would make me taller. Iruka was both relieved and chagrined at Naruto's answer. He couldn't help but laugh and say, "All right Naruto, have Anko work on your kicks then, we don't want anyone seriously hurt in a spar." He watched as Naruto nodded solemnly and then let the boy go. Iruka was glad that Naruto was getting the training he needed to bloom. The kid had a rough life and the deaths of Ayame and her father were harsh blows that could have shattered the poor boy. He couldn't help but feel a bit of guilt at the way he had treated Naruto in the early years at the academy. Grow strong Naruto and always keep that childlike spirit. Kurama congratulated himself on his own cleverness. The sappy instructor had bought his lie hook line and sinker. He casually made his way over to the training grounds where Anko was waiting for him. "You're a bit late, Runt. Where have you been?" Iruka-sensei wanted to know where I got so good at kicking ass. Anko grinned. "You win another match." "Against who?" "Ino Yamanaka." "Not bad kid. That's one of the clan heirs. I bet she's in the running for the top kunoichi spot." Kurama gave a shrug and then burst out into a grin. "I can't wait to take on Sasuke Tem." The two spent some time on taijutsu work and Anko began teaching Naruto a new set of stretches that would loosen his limbs more than normal. "Ow, these hurt," Kurama complained as he assumed Naruto would have. "Yup, and you'll need to keep doing them for the next month or it will all be for nothing. This will allow your body to bend in a way most shinobi can't do. This adds to the confusion of your opponent when your limbs do things that don't appear to be naturally possible. This isn't the Nan no Kaizo, soft physique modification, but it is still incredibly useful." "I've never heard of that jutsu before." Anko explained that it was a jutsu only a few shinobi use. It required body modification typically done through surgery and then training in using chakra to move one's limbs when muscles couldn't accomplish the type of movement required. Kurama gave that type of path little consideration. It wouldn't be practical while Naruto's body was growing to adulthood and he wasn't planning to be within his host for that long anyway. In any event, learning the stretches would benefit him in his current fighting style. They wrapped up their training by Anko observing his chakra control. "You still have a lot of work ahead of you kid, but it's gotten a bit better." Kurama didn't like being reminded of his failure in that area. The vast amount of chakra the boy had made controlling it nearly impossible. It had only been a few weeks so there was still time, but Kurama was starting to despair of ever being able to get the accursed Bunshin no Jutsu clone technique to work. It was like trying to add soil to a potted plant when the only tool that you had was a massive shovel designed for a biju. Excess chakra ruined the effect. "I'll keep working on it, but I am already trying really hard. Hey, maybe you can ask another sensei about any other chakra control techniques that might work better for me." The demon fox snickered to himself as he saw the telltale signs of Anko getting irritated. It was subtle and no academy student or genin would have noticed, but Kurama did. The purple-haired kunoichi resisted the urge to hurt her little student. The question was innocent enough, but if she didn't know any better she would have sworn the little shit had hidden a deliberate barb in that question. "The chakra training techniques I've given you are all you need. Work harder and be patient." Anko responded without any hint in her voice she was insulted and angry. Kurama cackled as he made Naruto's head nod in agreement. "I'll keep working on it." As Naruto ran off to continue his training in his apartment, Anko headed to the Hokage Tower. The head of the village wanted to talk to her about how Naruto's training was going. Hiruzen saw Anko enter his office and gave her a grandfatherly smile. "Ah, Anko, thank you for seeing me. I wanted to ask how Naruto-kun's training was progressing." She bowed her head slightly and replied, "He is doing well. His taijutsu skill has progressed considerably. His conditioning and the better diet you placed him on is helping him start to achieve faster muscle growth. His speed has increased as well." "But," the Hokage asked, sensing that there was something more. "He learns very oddly. It takes him some time to master new concepts, which led me to believe he was somewhat mentally deficient. However, once he has mastered something he never does it wrong, never." Sarutobi raised an eyebrow. "I've only ever seen that much precision from Guy, and that is due to grueling hours of training that firmly ingrains every taijutsu move and attack into his muscles. Naruto doesn't seem to need that level of repetition in order to fully master a skill." "Interesting, and promising for his career as a shinobi. How is his chakra control?" "Terrible. He is working on it and there has been some improvement, but the size of his chakra coils is making it difficult for him." Hiruzen knew Kushina had a similar problem, which was why she focused on chakra-intensive techniques to overwhelm her opponents. Will he be able to graduate with his class? Anko gave a slight shrug. In taijutsu and most ninjutsu he will be fine. His stealth abilities were already impressive before I started. His knowledge base is pitiful, but that's never been important to genin graduates. The only problem he will have is the clone technique. Hiruzen puffed on his pipe as he thought about the situation. He had just made an exception for Rock Lee to become a genin despite not being able to do the basic 3 academy jutsu. Should he do the same for Naruto? Since the tragedy with Tsuki and Ayame, Naruto had thrown himself into becoming a strong shinobi. He was blossoming under Anko's instruction and had every sign of becoming a fine shinobi. Would he really hold him back because of an inability to do a simple bunshin? Best to wait and see. Perhaps Naruto will surprise us. Well done, Anko. You have demonstrated the abilities needed of a sensei. If Naruto can pass the academy test as well as the genin test, I see no reason why you couldn't be made a full jonin. Anko grinned. The distinction between jonin and a tokubetsu jonin could mean little or a lot depending on who you were asking. A tokubetsu jonin only had to be skilled at a jonin level in one specific area to make the rank. A full jonin had to be skilled in multiple areas. In Konoha there was an additional requirement. A full jonin had to be declared fit to be a sensei over a genin team. Her own immediate superior, Ibiki, probably could have taken on the jonin rank, but since he had no desire to ever train genin and could give a spit's worth for people's perceptions, he never bothered. However, Anko did care about the village's opinion of her. On the surface she didn't seem to care, but deep down she wanted to rub it in their faces that they were dead wrong about her. She was not a psychotic traitor in the making. She was a loyal kunoichi of the Leaf who had interesting hobbies. The jonin rank would be her vindication. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen waved her off. He was pleased that Naruto was developing. It helped assuage some of the guilt he had over the deaths of the ramen vendors. He had thought a team deployed to watch Naruto would be enough. He had never dreamed his own shinobi would be cruel and vindictive enough to attack the boy's few acquaintances. As it was, he now had a pair of Anbu trailing Iruka as well. He had briefly thought about having guards posted on Anko, but it seemed unnecessary. She was more than capable of handling herself. His assessment of her skills was part of the reason he had no problem with dangling the jonin rank in front of her. Her taijutsu was solidly at jonin level. The hubby's style was an impressive fighting art indeed. In straight taijutsu spars he had even lost to his own student who had wielded the style. Her ninjutsu was passable if nothing truly special. She rarely used genjutsu but was adept at breaking out of it. In the arts of stealth and infiltration there were few who could match her. Her knowledge of poisons and their use provided an additional nasty surprise for would-be opponents. And finally, her summoning abilities alone could mark her place as an elite jonin. Some of the larger snakes she could summon were easily a match by themselves for some of the lower-end jonin. The village has mistreated the both of you. My hope is that together you can show them how wrong they are and make Konoha all the stronger for it. At the academy, students were starting to respect Naruto more. His skill in taijutsu had increased as had his proficiency with thrown weapons. Many of the civilian kids still looked at him with contempt due to what their parents had taught them, but the clan heirs were a bit more respectful. Ino did in fact have a bruise on her throat, and her ability to speak loudly was largely curtailed for a few days. She was a bit more wary about insulting the unpredictable blonde. Shikamaru, when he could be bothered, kept an eye on Naruto. He had seen that kick and it looked like it had been deliberate. That action was at odds with Naruto's personality, and it made him wonder if there was more to the boy than met the eye. If he had more motivation he might have done more than wonder, but since there had been no repeats it was simply too troublesome to look into. Choji had never had a problem with Naruto and his opinion hadn't changed much at all. Sasuke had given the boy a second look. The dead last was showing some skill and he was eager to see how he would do against the unique fighting style he saw. He was disappointed that he would have to wait 2 weeks before it was his turn to spar with him. Shino likewise had never had a problem with Naruto, though he had found his loudness and unpredictability annoying. Hinata was her normal shy self around Naruto, however in spars she seemed to have gained some confidence due to Naruto suddenly becoming better. Kiba on the other hand had a very different reaction. He now saw Naruto as a threat in the pack, standing as opposed to the dead last class clown. This meant that he was quickly becoming a thorn in Kurama's side. He did things like giving him a hard shoulder when they walked into class, throwing items and blaming it on Naruto, or loudly belittling him. Kurama stewed and wondered how suspicious it would be if the mutt suddenly ended up dead from poison. he could pick one Anko hadn't showed him yet that he had researched on his own. Better not. Suspicion would still fall on me. Over the next few days Kiba continued to bait Naruto. Kurama decided he would have it out publicly with the boy and suffer a few consequences but ultimately keep the expectations about him the same. That day when Kiba gave him a shove as they were entered, Kurama reacted with an unexpected elbow to Kiba's face. He then turned and kicked the surprised Inuzuka in the chest, sending him careening into Iruka's desk. In an instant Iruka put himself between the angry-looking Naruto and Kiba, who had leapt up ready for a fight. What is the meaning of this? Kurama glared at Kiba. He shoved me. Kiba growled. You were in the way. Iruka sighed. You were both training to be shinobi. You very well may be comrades in the future. Act like it. Kurama walked stiffly back to his desk while Kiba did the same. Kiba muttered underneath his breath. You little doby, hitting me with a surprise attack. Next time it will be different. Kurama chuckled at such childish threats. He really was above this. If the cur beside him ever sniffed his real form he would wet himself. It galled him the little mortals couldn't be made to suffer for speaking to him this way. But in due time they will. Break asterisk. After Iruka's warning, Kiba backed off a bit and the days passed productively. Anko drilled him on chakra control exercises for much of their training time. Kurama wondered why she seemed so much more motivated. It wasn't as if she hadn't tried to help him with chakra control before, but now she seemed to focus on it more than on other things. With progress slow, Anko decided to try something different. Alright Gaki, I am going to show you a more advanced technique that typically isn't taught until you have a Jonin sensei outside of the academy. It uses more chakra than the Bunshin, so it might be easier. If you can master it, then maybe it will be easier to work your way down. What is it? You'll be pushing chakra into your feet in order to stick to a tree and actually walk up it. Here, let your amazing instructor demonstrate. And with that Anko casually walked up the tree. Kurama was familiar with shinobi clinging to surfaces. He had fought many in the glorious time where he was free to roam around in his natural form. In Naruto's exuberant voice he said, "Let me try." Kurama took a step on the tree and the bark immediately disintegrated. Big surprise, you put too much chakra into it. It will help if you get a running start and use a minimal amount. Kurama nodded and did just that. He made it up 2 steps before the bark disintegrated again. Thanks to the improvements in training he was able to complete a backward flip and land on his feet instead of slamming into the ground in an undignified manner. Anko watched her student make dozens of attempts. He wasn't making much progress, but she had to credit him for his determination, and then she saw Naruto had stopped and was looking at the tree in concentration. What are you doing, short stuff? Kurama grinned at Anko with an over-the-top Naruto smile. I have an idea. Anko felt chakra stir in the air. The kid was putting out far more chakra than was necessary for the exercise. Leave it to Naruto to take the lesson in the wrong direction. Finesse, not power, is needed. But much to her surprise, Naruto made it up half a dozen steps before faltering. He made it 7 steps the next time. She tried to puzzle out what he was doing. The light bulb went off as she saw his clothing cling to him. Naruto had a hard time with these exercises due to the massive amount of chakra he had. Instead of merely concentrating chakra on his feet, he was concentrating it on his entire body and thus thinning out the amount of chakra at any particular body part. It was actually quite clever if terribly inefficient. But I suppose Naruto has chakra to burn, and once he gets it down this way he can start further refining it. All right kid, you're getting the hang of it. For the rest of our practice keep working on this and tomorrow we'll be upping the difficulty. Kurama watched Anko leave. He was glad he had found a way to make progress with the tree walking exercise. He would gain control of the boy's chakra network, and when he did he would be given the opportunity to learn advanced techniques. It would be suspicious if he asked to learn Fuinjutsu, since that would likely be the first type of technique a compromised Jinchuriki would want to learn. He was nothing if not clever, and he would eventually steer the conversation in that direction without others being aware of it. In the meantime he had a tree to climb. Break asterisk. True to her word, Anko had made it more difficult. As he was trying to climb the trees with chakra, she would toss blunted kunai at him with rather significant force. He would have to deflect the kunai while running up the tree. Fortunately Kurama was adept at multitasking. He was able to deflect the kunai without impairing his chakra control. However, Anko didn't like having her fun ruined, so she started throwing the kunai with much greater force. The kunai raced toward him at speeds greater than most genin could deflect, let alone an academy student. Kurama and his superior senses could detect them of course, but even with that added advantage the body he possessed needed better reflexes to react. And so Anko laughed as Naruto fell from the tree in an ungainly heap several times from her blunted kunai. His look of pain and frustration were a joyful sight. The best part was that the Sandaime himself had used a similar training tactic on his students, so it wasn't like she could get in trouble for it. Kurama could feel pain, and while it was annoying it was nothing compared to what he had suffered in the past. It would have been expected for Naruto to show pain on his features, and so he did that. He also could sense that Anko was enjoying herself in this training exercise. I can't really blame her. Watching people suffer is amusing. Interestingly enough, Kurama had no desire to rend Mitarashi to pieces. When Kiba or one of the other students irritated him, he had to control himself to avoid murdering the little shits. When Anko caused more pain through her blunted kunai in one afternoon than Kiba had done all year at the academy, he didn't feel any animosity. What was he feeling? Respect for a kindred spirit. Of course she was his inferior in every possible way, but still, something about her made him want to spare her when he destroyed the village for daring to confine him. They spent the rest of their training time working on the tree walking. Well, to be more precise, the tree running exercise. At the end of it he had still not been able to get all the way to the top. But there had been substantial progress. Anko made him complete the painful stretching exercise and then let him loose for the rest of the day. Kurama returned to the apartment and continued to work on his chakra control exercises as well as the supplemental conditioning. It had been less than a month, but his body was gaining more definition and he could tell he was both stronger and faster than he was when he first took over. He was no longer dead last in the academy rankings. That dubious honor had been taken up by a civilian boy completely unsuited for shinobi training. Graduate the academy, become a genin, begin learning fuinjutsu, become a chunin, learn more about fuinjutsu and make it my specialty, become a jonin, become a seal master, destroy the Leaf Village. One step at a time, Kurama thought to himself. Patience would be needed, but so far he was progressing along nicely. It was now 6 weeks since Kurama had begun studying under Anko. His taijutsu had grown by leaps and bounds. The academy style had severe difficulty encountering his hubby's style. Combined with that innate advantage and the improvement in his body, he was soon soundly defeating the rest of his peers in the taijutsu spars. Today the class was abuzz with the latest matchup, Naruto Uzumaki vs Sasuke Uchiha. Sakura loudly yelled at Naruto, "You got a bit better, but you are no match for Sasuke-kun." "Yeah," Ino chimed in. Shikamaru, who had his nap interrupted by the yelling, just rolled his head a bit and muttered, "Troublesome." Kurama was only mildly worried about advancing too fast. After all, he was receiving personal instruction from a taijutsu expert in a style that countered the academy-taught moves almost perfectly. His schoolwork had improved but was still subpar, and his atrocious chakra control didn't need to be faked. He was honestly looking forward to the match with the young Uchiha. This would be a truer test of how much his host's body had improved than his previous matches. Mizuki and Iruka settled the class down and started the sparring with Naruto and Sasuke. Sasuke was also eager for the fight. The academy had been boring and he was rarely challenged. The Inuzuka was the only one who had any ferocity, but he was easy to fool in their taijutsu matches. Now the dead last had been given supplemental training and might actually prove to be a challenge. The fight began with Kurama sliding forward at a steady pace before launching a quick kick at a much higher rate of speed. Either Sasuke hadn't been fooled or his reflexes were just that good, since he managed to knock the limb aside and counter with a blistering fast set of punches. The class saw Naruto block, bend and twist away from all of the blows. His body was moving in surprising ways that clearly frustrated the Uchiha's advance. On the other hand, Kurama could not get in a good attack either. Sasuke was just plain faster. 6 weeks hasn't allowed me to improve this body's speed much. Kurama rolled under a high kick and attempted an unexpected leg sweep on his way past. However, Sasuke jumped over the leg. Since the Uchiha was airborne, Kurama saw an opportunity. By pushing chakra into the soles of his feet, he was able to come up and rocket toward Sasuke with more speed than normal. The earth around his launching point was shattered by the chakra push. Sasuke was surprised by the move but quickly blocked the punch and snapped a kick in midair that caught the rising Naruto in the gut and sent him back down hard on the ground. Point for Sasuke. Kurama sprang back to his feet. He was angry that the raven-haired boy was stronger and faster than he was. If he tapped into just a fraction of his power, he could kill him. The rest of the class and the Chunin instructors easily. However, if he did that it would alert the old man, and even if he took half the village down with him eventually he would be sealed again, so instead he forced down the urge to annihilate everyone around him and put his guard up in a defensive position. Amy, another one of Sasuke's fangirls, shouted out, "Yeah, get him Sasuke-kun, if you beat him I'll give you a kiss." Ino and Sakura growled at the purple-haired girl but soon turned back to the fight as the two continued their taijutsu spar. Mizuki watched, slightly awed at the moves. They were both fighting at upper genin level. He would expect to see a match like this in the Chunin exams not 10 months before graduation. Sasuke advanced cautiously and probed Naruto's defenses with some light punches and kicks that didn't have much force behind them. Kurama smoothly countered all of the blows but remained defensive, keeping his limbs close to his body. Eventually Sasuke grew tired of probing and rushed in with a hard strike to the face that Kurama avoided by sliding perpendicular to the blow. He countered with an elbow straight to the face but the speedy Uchiha caught the blow in his palm and then shoved him back hard. The unexpected strength drove Kurama off balance and left him open. It was probably similar to what a Sharingan wielder saw against an opponent too fast for his body to match. Even though his eyes could see the attack coming, Kurama had greater perception than anyone without a dojutsu. He knew instantly that he would not be able to counter the fast snap kick that was coming for him. The kick connected and the kids cheered as the ostracized one went down from the hard blow. Kurama rose to his feet while the point was called. Kurama knew it was hopeless but Naruto wouldn't give up, so he had to make it look good. "Arg Sasuke Tem, I am going to beat you, believe it." Sasuke snorted as he saw Naruto charge forward with almost no semblance of an attack strategy. After a few short exchanges Naruto lunged too far with an attack and Sasuke scored a blow to his ribs that ended the match. Iruka patted Naruto on the shoulder. "Good try Naruto, just make sure you keep your cool, in the last round you were pretty erratic." Kurama put on a frustrated and sad look for the instructor and snarled internally. "I'll rip your eyes out, you blind fool." Uchiha has the advantage of having a superior body for the time being, but that is only a temporary setback. Break. Training continued with Anko. Tree walking had done a bit to help out in the chakra control department and Kurama was now able to spar against his sensei on the side of a tree. Mitarashi was satisfied with Naruto's progress with poison, thrown weaponry and taijutsu. His inability to get the Bunshin down frustrated her greatly, and as she grew more comfortable with the boy she started to make the lessons a bit more painful, all in the name of training of course. Kurama could feel pain but had long been inured to the costs of it. Having the feeling of your limbs being pinned down by spikes made bruises seem inconsequential. Anko didn't know this though, and so he had to pretend that the pain hurt him and motivated him to try harder. Anko then introduced trap detection and trap making into the curriculum. The basics had been taught in the academy and Naruto prior to the possession had actually been rather creative in a form of trap making he used for pranks. However, the kunoichi had introduced several new concepts that made killing via trap very easy. Almost too easy really. A simple makebishi could slow down pursuit, however laced with the right poison it could have the victim drop dead within a minute. When using poison all it took was a scratch to take someone out of the fight. Combined with the numerous ways to hide triggers, it was a wonder any shinobi ever dared venture out of their home. Granted, the more powerful shinobi had amazing detection skills. That lesson came through loud and clear. Always be aware of your surroundings. However, Kurama's near awe of poisons did take a blow when Anko discussed how to counteract them. "Alright kid, I've shown you how deadly poison can be. Now that you have respect for them, I'll go over how to neutralize them before you croak." Kurama waited for Anko to explain further. Outside of the obvious such as not getting hit by a poisoned weapon or inhaling poisonous gas, there are 3 main ways to counter a poison user. She held up a finger. The first is to develop immunity to certain poisons by getting your body to slowly tolerate small doses of it. The fact that we are ninja makes it easier than the poor civilian saps. Our chakra helps the tolerance process. This is also why shinobi have to drink really strong liquor to get inebriated. Kurama listened interestedly. Anything that could be used to preserve this body until he learned how to counteract the sealing arts was of use to him. But Anko, didn't you say there were hundreds of poisons? How would anyone be able to build a tolerance for them all? Got it in one gaki. Developing a tolerance for the commonly used poisons is typically what is done. The more exotic types become more difficult since their rarity means it's hard to get a supply in the first place, and even if you did, what are the odds you would encounter a shinobi using it? Anko walked up a tree and motioned for Naruto to join her. No sense in wasting time while she lectured when he could be getting better with chakra control. The second way to counteract poisons is learn Dokusei Kiyomaru no Jutsu, Poison Cleanse Technique. This is the next jutsu I will teach you. You flood your tenketsu points with chakra and have it circle through your chakra network. When done correctly, most poisons can be drawn into the network and then expelled through your pores. Now Kurama was a bit upset. If a simple jutsu could correct all of the wonderfully diabolical poison combinations he had studied, then what was the point? With little acting required, he pushed more than the appropriate amount of chakra into his feet, causing the bark to explode. He landed and looked angrily up at Anko while pointing. "Why did you make me study all those poisons? What a waste of time." Anko smirked and dropped down next to her student. "Lots of reasons, you ungrateful brat. Most genin don't learn that jutsu in the first place. It's typically learned once a shinobi reaches the rank of chunin. Secondly, it takes a bit of time to work depending on how good you are with the technique. In the middle of the fight it's going to be difficult to use while still fighting. And finally, you twit, it doesn't work on all poisons." Kurama was slightly mollified. Poison would still grant a strong edge in combat, and when he thought about it, a lot of poisons worked within seconds, which wouldn't be enough time to use the technique in the first place. "Sorry, Anko-sensei," he mumbled. Anko moved on to the third way to counteract poison in the field. Antidotes via injections or pills are the final way. Typically, if you know the type of poison an enemy will use, the local medical nin can have an antidote prepared. Alternatively, there are generic antidotes that deal with the most common poisons. As part of the standard chunin gear you get 3 of them. For the most part the generic catch-alls are rubbish against skilled poison users but fairly effective against amateurs. She handed Naruto 3 capsules for his own use. Just in case you prick yourself while practicing applying poison to your weapons. Kurama took the capsules and put them in one of the pouches on his jumpsuit. "Now let's start getting your body acclimated to some of the poisons frequently used in Hai no Kuni," Anko said with an evil grin. Using speed that no genin, let alone an academy student, could match, she dashed forward and stuck a senbon into Naruto's shoulder. Kurama felt the poison seep into the tissue surrounding his shoulder and felt sharp pain spike through that limb. He made Naruto give a cry of pain, and there was some honesty in it too. The poison hurt. It felt like his entire arm was on fire. This little poison is typically used in interrogations as opposed to field work, but in a pinch it works fairly well. It's obtained from a plant found only in Hai no Kuni called fire thistle. The effect agitates the nerves quite severely, mimicking a burning sensation. It also makes the poisoned area shake, causing the infected enemy to be unable to hold weapons or use hand signs. Kurama didn't like this sensation at all, and he imagined Naruto would take it far worse, and so he gave out another scream of pain as he felt the toxin fully take hold of his arm. Anko watched amused as her student clutched his arm. She was impressed on how the kid grit his teeth and tried to avoid crying out again, but this poison wasn't child's play. She grinned as he gave another grunt of anguish. "So my little Gaki, I've gotten you up to speed for the academy. Hell, you'd be fine against most baby-faced genin, so our time is done unless you have the balls to stick with my training plan." Kurama narrowed his eyes dangerously at his sensei. A few bruises he would tolerate easily enough, but this was on par with the torment he felt while sealed in Kushina. "Those generic antidotes will actually fix you right up in just a few minutes, but if you take one then I am done being your sensei." Anko looked down on her student, who was now writhing on the ground. Kurama's choice was obvious. Personalized training from a jonin would be superior to anything he could do on his own. Oh, he would grow stronger by himself, certainly, but not as quickly as he would under Anko's tutelage. "I'll never give up, believe it." Orochimaru's apprentice let out a laugh. "I love your spirit, kid, and just so you aren't tempted, let's make sure you can't go back on your word." Kurama watched in horror as Anko pulled out another senbon coated with the same substance and drove it into his other shoulder. A fresh wave of searing fire danced along his nervous system. "The shaking in your hands will go away in about 45 minutes and you'll be able to take one of your capsules. However, if you do, we are done. That radiating pain you feel will go away in a couple hours if you manage to tough it out." Kurama shook with pain and fury. How dare this girl reduce him to this state? He could rip her to shreds in an eye blink. He could show her the true meaning of suffering, and she had no idea how very close to obliteration she was. But he would be damned if he failed this test. He was the Kyuubi no Yoko, and he would not give in to something as paltry as pain. What's that brat? Say something. Screw you. I already told you I'll never give up. I am going to get stronger so I can protect people. Anko wasn't quite sure why she did it. Maybe she just wanted to break the stubborn brat. Maybe she just enjoyed the thought of him suffering even worse pain. Maybe she was tired of wasting her afternoons. Ultimately she didn't know why, but she wanted to win one over on him. She had planned to give him 2 doses of the toxin, but that was it. She did have a shred of decency left after all. Instead she took out the vial and coated another Senbon. She tossed it casually at his leg. She pulled out another one and threw it at the other leg. A scream was ripped from Naruto's throat as fire coated the boy's entire nervous system. The kunoichi gave him a cheeky wave and disappeared with the body flicker technique. Kurama shuddered. It literally felt like he was on fire. The sobs and screams that escaped Naruto's mouth were only partially fake. Minutes ticked by while the 4 Anbu looked at each other and wondered if they should do anything. Being Anbu, they were elite and were familiar with the poison used, so they knew it wasn't something that was fatal. With a shrug they chose to do nothing for now and report the incident to the Hokage later. Kurama snarled and arched his host's back. Twice he almost broke loose from the confines of his host body, but each time he drove back the desire with the strength of his pride. He would not be defeated by a simple poison. He would not let the snake bitch win one over on him. Minute after minute passed by until finally his right arm stopped shaking. Now if he chose to, he could take the antidote and end the suffering. Here the temptation was greater, since giving in would just mean he was out a sensei. Previously it would have meant revealing himself as the Kyuubi and probably being sealed again. But pride reared up its head again. And self-interest. If he wanted to rise up the ranks quickly, having a specialized instructor would help immeasurably. And so he lay there gasping in pain for the next couple of hours. The agony didn't lessen until the last few minutes, and then it gradually drained away. He had done it. He lay there enjoying the feeling of his nerves not being drenched in molten lava. After a good long while he painfully got up and made his way back to the apartment. ****. The Sandame was furious. Are you insane? He spoke harshly, just barely above a whisper. Anko could feel the killing intent radiating from the Hokage. No doubt about it, he was pissed. My apologies, I was trying to test if he had what it takes to continue. Sarutobi slammed a hand on his desk. Don't even start. Requiring a test like that of an academy student is unconscionable. My sensei did the same. I said don't start. You were a chunin at the time, and do you really think comparing yourself to Orochimaru will win you any favors here? The kunoichi decided it was a good time to be quiet. She had rarely seen the Hokage so angry. The man could have easily washed his hands of her after Orochimaru's defection. She knew several who had advised him to do so, but instead he had stood up for her and allowed her to continue serving Konoha. Hiruzen took a deep breath. You subjected him to 3 hours of torment. I've read the reports from T&I, and the occasional jonin sometimes even breaks from that sort of treatment, and this is a boy, not even a shinobi. A student at the academy. If this was a child from one of the clans, they would be demanding your head. Even as Anko looked down, she knew the old mont's eyes were resting on her, weighing what to do with her. She had really screwed up. Speak, and no more excuses. She looked up and said, I understand what I did was wrong. The only thing I have to say is that Naruto passed the test. Passed a harder test than I took when I was apprenticed to Orochimaru Tem. He's earned the reward of my continued tutelage. Punish me if you will, but don't take that away from. The man known as the professor eyed her. Quite clever, Anko. Quite clever indeed. He wasn't going to throw away a shinobi of her caliber, and her words did have merit. Naruto had suffered through a lot for the opportunity to continue his training. Very well. You may continue his training. However, you will still be disciplined for your actions. You will forego all pay for your training of him. You will also be required to complete 1D rank mission per day for the next 6 months. Dismissed. Anko breathed a sigh of relief after she left the Hokage's presence. It could have been far worse. Abuse of a student could lead to demotion, dismissal, or even death. The fact that it was an academy student made it worse, as they were not yet legally adults. And she couldn't even use the argument that she was trying to get him used to the poison. That kind of training involved a smaller than normal dose, so the effect wasn't full-blown. Yes, she had gotten lucky. She suspected it was residual guilt over the Hokage's apprentice placing the cursed seal on her. She would hate doing the D-ranked missions, and the loss in pay hurt, but in the end she still had her position and wouldn't have to spend any time in confinement. Thanks for watching.